Welcome to the Backyard Professor live on Sunday night. It is already August, and it is already almost halfway through August, and I'm going to go outside and picket and protest that time is passing too fast. Who among us will join me? I will have as much accomplishment doing that as I will convincing apologists they don't have a clue. Tonight, we are going to look at the business side of Mormonism in an ongoing discussion. I believe this has been happening for about 4 years, and there is some continuing interesting ideas on how the business model of Mormonism, come on. We all know Mormonism is not a religion. It's a business now. It's a corporation. The corporation of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But they're making fatal errors. And that's what I want to explore tonight. So let's get this show on the road. Just looking through the comments real quick. Happy birthday, Alan Zabriskie. Congratulations. Happy birthday soon to my beloved friend Tim Rathbone. Mark Crispin, you're here. Yeah, baby. That's right. We got to do the yeah, baby. And who else is among us? Wanda Anthony, welcome. Doug, Vincent, the man, Newton Lemos, how are you? Let's see who else is showing up here. Barry Richens, my man Barry. Joel Walker, good to see you. Peter Higgs, good day to you, mate. Yes, sir. Very nice. Did Joseph Smith practice polygamy? That's not my question. That's the handle of this person. Welcome. The answer is hell yes. Duh, except for those who want to twist the history. Boy, Mormons are such weird people sometimes. Some of them, not all of them. I have great friends and neighbors who are Mormon. I wouldn't trade them in, but wow. Richard Petchak, good to see you. Radio Free Mormon. Yes, Jacob Lewis, Marquita Armstrong, good to see you. Dan Vogel, the man, Dan the man, good to always see you. Grandma Carlson, good to see you. Don Smith, Nikki McBee, Anna Gill, Jacob Lewis, James Conger, El Sonnabend, Howie Rourke, Joel Walker, Howie Roach. Wow, look at all you fabulous people. This is going to be what I would like to consider a very important subject. Some of it's technical, might get a little bit boring. It's not nearly as exciting as the Book of Abraham to me personally. Hey, Marissa Elms, how are you? Marquita Armstrong, good to see you. Thank you, Mark Roach. He's saying I rock. I want to rock and roll all night. Want it every day. I want to rock and roll all night. Come on, I used to skateboard to that as a teenager, right? We all did. Okay, no more singing, please. I kept my day job. Yes, thank you very much. So, this idea that I want to share with you, I've printed it out because there's bits and pieces and parts that I want to skip, but I do want to give you the entire gist. Might be a little bit long tonight. Very important subject because we know that the corporation of Mormonism is masquerading as a religion, and it gets tax-free benefits, of course. And as a business, they're just billions and billions. They swim in the money. I just looked it up. You can look it up. Google this if you think I'm kidding. Oh, Doug Vincent, thank you very kindly. I am Grandma Carlson. Yeah, the song gave me away, huh? Yeah. Kiss. Knights in Satan's Service. That's what we were told the acronym meant back when we were teenagers. You remember Lex de Azevedo, the Saturday's Warrior? My turn, it's my turn, it's my turn on earth. Yeah, you guys all showed up just to listen to me sing. Well, Lex de Azevedo convinced everyone in our ward that all that stuff I was listening to, the Beach Boys and Foreigner and REO Speedwagon and all those guys, Chicago, and all of that, and Kiss, all of that was the devil's music. Boy, Beatles and so on and so forth. ZZ Top. Yeah, baby. Legs. I'm just saying. Okay, so anyway, so this particular situation tonight is pretty important. Now, we were apprised of it back in 2019. I say we, the message board that I inhabit. And yeah, Chicago also, Don Smith. Yes, how could I miss out Chicago? Yeah. Yep. So this idea of a business model, I'm going to read it on screen, and yet I have some notes that I'm going to keep because I have some things that I'm going to refer to. And Journey, yes. Journey also. Yeah, man. Let's take a look. In 2009, now this is my good friend, Dr. Moore, who is over on the Shades message board with us, one of the most intelligent of men on this planet. I'm so grateful for him and his research, and I gratefully acknowledge I am pilfering from him. I'm pulling a Dan C. Peterson. I am plagiarizing, except I'm doing the backyard professor of Dan C. Peterson. I am giving proper credit where credit's due, and Dr. Peterson refuses to do that for whatever reason. I don't get it, but everyone's got their own quirks. So Jim Collins, now he published a really important book, 2009. How long ago was that, you guys? Like 14 years ago. And this book has not gone out of date. It has increased in its relevance, astonishingly so. How the Mighty Fall. Now, this was a fourth book in his wildly successful series, Good to Great. And it's a timely discussion for business leaders. And it was dropped just within a few months of the lowest point in the so-called Great Recession back in 2009. So instead of looking at the leadership characteristics and what made companies good, go from good to absolutely magnifico, superbo, maya, ooh la la, he took the opposite approach. He said, why do multi-billion-dollar companies, why do the big successful companies fail? What is it they're doing that is causing them failure when they become some of the greatest companies in the history of economics on our planet? And I thought, well, now that's an intriguing subject. It's very good. So Dr. Moore read this, and as he read through it, he says, I was stricken throughout by parallels to the modern LDS church. And yes, he recognizes there are differences between churches and businesses, but of course. But to the extent that both the businesses and the churches succeed by selling more of a product or a service, they are led by fallible leaders and a struggle in the face of constant change. I believe the analogy has material relevance, and he is so correct. He just recently updated us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you his idea, some of his ideas from 2019, when he first helped us become aware of this. Then he updated us again in 2022. And now he's recently updated us again in 2023. The astonishing thing is it's getting worse for the church, and they don't see it. So this is what I want to discuss. And you will certainly recognize what Dr. Moore talks about here. And yet there are some dandy surprises. That is why I wanted to make this video. So thank you, Dr. Moore, if you're happening to watch. If not, I still love you, brother. So let's take a look. What he does is he gives the bullet point markers which characterize stages 2, 3, and 4. And so there's several stages, and I will show you a chart later on in this presentation. Oh, for the love of Sam Walton. I can take his name in vain. I used to work for him over at Sam's Club. I've got it here somewhere. Hold on. I'll show it to you right now, and then that way I can get it over with. Oh, criminy, do I have everything I need? Oh, here it is. Okay, hold on. Don't let me lose my place here. Don't let me lose my place. You hear me? This chart right here is a very, very important chart that he is going to be discussing. These are the 5 stages of the ascension of a successful business and then its decline. And he talks about there's various bullet points in each stage. And Dr. Moore says, the more I read this, even in stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, it's getting worse. And so this is remarkably interesting that the leadership, the claimed inspired leadership prophets, are taking the exact same mistaken path and making the same types of mistakes as many of the mega big corporations have in the past, and they become irrelevant. They failed, they've disappeared, they're gone. Kaput, bankrupt, no more, cease and desist, you're out of here, buckwheat. So this is critically interesting. What I'll do is I will read each of the stage bullet points to you, stages 2, 3, and 4. Then in the discussion, they analyze the various stages, and I will share those with you in the discussion again, because there's too many to remember all at once, but I do want to at least read them all out loud to you, and you see if you are seeing parallels as well. So, stage 2 markers. Number 1, there is an unsustainable quest for growth. And what is happening in this stage, they want to grow. Oh, we got to get bigger. We're not big enough. We're not powerful enough. Big. Did I say we want to get big? And they confuse being big with being great. So success creates pressure for more growth, and this sets up a vicious cycle of expectations. This strains people. This strains the culture and the systems to the breaking point. Unable to deliver consistent tactical excellence, the institution frays at the edges. The second point in stage 2, the undisciplined, discontinuous leaps. The enterprise makes dramatic moves that fail at least one of the following 3 tests. A, do they ignite passion, and do they fit with the company's core values? B, can the organization be the best in the world at these activities or in these arenas? And C, will these activities help drive the organization's economic or resource engine? And we're going to go into detail in all of this tonight. I just want to get this out there. The third bullet point in stage 2, now this is the beginning stage, is the declining proportion of right people in key seats. there is a declining proportion of right people in key seats because of losing the right people and or growing beyond the organization's ability to get enough people to execute on that growth with excellence. The fourth idea is easy cash erodes cost discipline. The organization responds to increasing costs by increasing prices and revenues rather than increasing discipline. Number 5, the bureaucracy subverts discipline. A system of bureaucratic rulers subverts the ethic of freedom and responsibility that marks a culture of discipline. People increasingly think in terms of jobs rather than responsibilities. The 6th bullet point, problematic succession of power. The organization experiences leadership transition difficulties, be they in the form of poor succession planning, failure to groom excellent leaders from within, political turmoil, bad luck, or an unwise selection of successors. The 7th bullet point is personal interests placed above the organizational interests. People in power allocate more of themselves or their constituents, more money, more privileges, more fame, more of the spoils of success, seeking to capitalize as much as possible in the short term, rather than investing primarily in building for greatness decades into the future. So that's all stage 2. In stage 3, which is a worse stage now, they've gotten to the pinnacle. In stage 3, they're at the top. The first marker is amplify the positive and discount the negative. There is a tendency to discount or to explain away negative data rather than presume that something is wrong with the company. Leaders highlight and amplify external praise and publicity. See, that's nothing like what we see in the church today, right? The second bullet point, big bets and bold goals without empirical validation. Leaders set audacious goals and or they make big bets that aren't based on accumulated experience, or worse, that fly in the face of the facts. The third point is incurring huge downside risk based on ambiguous data. When faced with ambiguous data and decisions that have a potentially severe or a catastrophic downside, leaders will take a positive view of the data and run the risk of blowing a hole below the waterline so that the ship begins to sink. The fourth point, erosion of healthy team dynamics. The team is critical. There is a marked decline in the quality and the amount of dialogue and debate. There is a shift toward either consensus or dictatorial management rather than a process of argument and disagreement followed up by the unified commitment to execute decisions. I mean, see, that doesn't sound like Mormonism at all, does it? The sixth thing is the obsessive reorganizations. Rather than confront the brutal realities, the enterprise chronically reorganizes. That is, people are increasingly preoccupied with internal politics rather than external conditions. The seventh point is imperious detachment. Those in power become more imperious and detached. Symbols and perks of executive class status amplify detachment. Plus, new office buildings may disconnect executives from daily life. So this is what happens when they get to the pinnacle point. Without even recognizing that they're slipping into stage 4, here are the problems that occur with a mega organization that begins to decline, even though things are looking really, really good and rosy, and you're raking in the big bucks. You're in decline when these kinds of issues start to show up. And we have many examples I will share with you tonight that has been getting worse from 2019 to 20, 21, 22. And now this year, it's steadily getting worse and it is rapidly increasing. So this is really important. So the first marker in the fourth stage, which is the declining stage, panic and haste. Instead of being calm, deliberate, and disciplined, people exhibit hasty, reactive behavior bordering on panic. The second marker is radical change and revolution with fanfare. So the language of revolution and radical change characterizes the new era. New programs, new cultures, new strategies, might I say, new names. Leaders engage in hoopla, spending a lot of energy trying to align and motivate people, engaging in buzzwords and taglines. Does any of this ring a bell? The third bullet point is hype precedes results. Instead of setting expectations low, underscoring the duration and difficulty of the turnaround, leaders hype their visions. What they're doing is they, quote, sell the future, unquote, to compensate for the lack of current results, initiating a pattern of overpromising and under-delivering. The fourth issue here is the initial upswing is followed by disappointments because, and this makes perfect sense, there is an initial burst of positive results, but they don't last. Dashed hope follows dashed hope follows dashed hope. The organization achieves no buildup, no cumulative momentum. The fifth issue is confusion and cynicism. People cannot easily articulate what the organization stands for. Core values have eroded to the point of irrelevance. The organization has become just another place to work, a place to get a paycheck. People lose faith in their ability to triumph and prevail. Instead of passionate believing in the organization's core values and purpose, people become distrustful regarding visions and values as little more than public relations and rhetoric. And the sixth bullet point is chronic restructuring and erosion of financial strength. So each failed initiative drains resources. Cash flow and financial liquidity begin to go down. The decline is coming on. The organization undergoes multiple restructurings, opinions or options narrow, and strategic decisions are increasingly dictated by circumstance. And it's here that I want to keep these two out because I'm going to have a lot more to say about those. So this is basically the stage 2, 3, and 4. And this is really going to be fascinating to see how and we get this mostly, believe it or not, in the general conferences. For real, yeah. And you'll recognize this as Dr. Moore brings it out, and I share this with you. It's fascinating. I had no idea. I really didn't. So this is remarkably interesting. Let's go on to, and I was the first one to post to him back in 2019. I said, yeah, this is very interesting. I see lots of parallels. And the first thing that came to my mind is, why not ask Jesus? But I suspect he won't be as full of good business sense as men actually engaged in business would. So I was being cynical here. So my good friend Gaddy Anton, now him and Dr. Moore kind of go back and forth a little bit. And the way they discuss this is so fascinating. It kind of sets the tone for all the rest of the discussion because they work through some of the problems and potential issues here That is really interesting. Stage 3, Gadianton says, does strike me as relevant. Now, that's the stage. Stage 3 is the one where they've reached their pinnacle. And this is where they're looking to get big instead of great. They want growth, We want to be the fastest growing church in the world, etc. And then they have undisciplined, discontinuous leaps. They can't get the right people to fill the right places, etc. Their leaders start sexually exploiting minors behind closed doors like the bishops do, stuff like that. And Gadianton says, I have a hard time placing stage 3 coming out of or evolving from stage 2, however. I can't really place stage 2, but then again, I don't have a lot of knowledge of the church's corporate history. So here's the idea. The leaders seem prone to living long lives, avoiding personal corruption and excesses, and pursuing their aims with discipline. And this hasn't really changed in 50 years, has it? I must assume that switching back and forth between being a church and being a business is explained by marginal returns on investment in either side, the business or the church. So historically, it appears to me that the modern church leaders are extraordinarily careful to the point of relying upon the best that outside consulting has to offer. No, not Jesus. He's talking business leaders. That's who the prophets get their revelations from on how to run the corporation. And with real estate and tech boons, it appears the church really lost touch with the religion, as the next dollar spent on religion did nothing compared to that dollar in real estate. He's got a point there, They weren't foolish in their plans for building the mall and creating a wealthy district downtown. Sure, it hasn't been done enough to have good data on doing that sort of thing, and the church isn't very innovative, so it's much more costly than they thought it would be. Yeah, we get all that, but they got black swaned. The best indication of despair is, after that, switching back to investing in religion. That they may have assumed was a better return on investment than they really got. For instance, they lowered the missionary age and so on. Whatever the plan was supposed to be, whether through converts or more dedicated members paying better tithing, it doesn't seem to have worked. Now, he's saying this in 2019. 2 and 3 from stage 4 seem pretty relevant now. Now, here's stage 4. And he says 2 and 3 seem really relevant. I want to reread these. Number 2 is radical change and revolution with fanfare. This is what Gadianton's talking about. This becomes even more relevant. He's saying this in 2019. Now 2023, this is really relevant. So the language of revolution, radical change characterizes the new era. We have new programs, new cultures, new strategies. Leaders engage in hoopla, spending a lot of energy trying to align and motivate people, engaging in buzzwords and taglines. Boy, don't they do that now. And he brings some dandy information on that. And number 3, that Gadianton also says is pretty relevant. Hype precedes results. Absolutely. Underscoring the duration and difficulty of the turnaround, leaders hype their vision. They love to sell the future, You better hang on and buckle your seatbelts. Wait till you get all this new revelation that's coming down the pike. And then Jesus just simply wants to change the church's name. I mean, we're talking boring, Jesus has nothing better to do, according to Russell Nelson. So, however, this could also be explained by the church discovering social media. So this idea of hype and hoopla, taglines and new little cute sayings, stay on the covenant path, stuff like that. Even though they are really slow on the uptake with social media in their attempt to master it. What I can't explain is that real estate and markets have recovered and they're doing great. And so what is the point of focusing on the religious side of things again? Is that a personal quirk of Nelson that aligns with a personal interest in stage 3, perhaps? Who knows? Their foray into policing world morality, perhaps, is a collective personal interest of Russell Nelson's generation. having issues seeing the point of all their wealth and property if their tenants aren't cardboard cut family values people from 1956. And now Dr. Moore describes his reaction to Gadianton's reaction. And here's where their discussion gets really very interesting, because both of these guys are very well read. They're very intelligent, etc. So Dr. Moore says, yes, I don't wish to overextend the enterprise analogy, and I'm going to be the first to admit that the church may be too different an animal than other large businesses to properly draw the lines across, of course. First, because unlike normal businesses now, new customers become employees and equity holders on day one, linking the growth algorithm to dynamics of network marketing through pyramid schemes, of course. And this adds the complexity of at least two issues. Number one, you have network exhaustion. And number two, you have the double-barreled sales problem. And this originates from personal credibility loss by association when supposedly factual products claims fall apart in the face of evidence. But the product itself hardens around social networks. And so what this does is this makes for a long tail of demand. Might we therefore expect any manifestation of an LDS incorporated downfall cycle to be far slower and harder to perceive? You're right about the conservatism of LDS leaders. It is a slow-moving beast, no doubt. But cash hoarding as a policy against revisiting earlier liquidity crises affords some cushion against the future as well. I'm reminded that had Apple not hoarded cash for many years, it would have gone broke before releasing the iPhone. So maybe the church's best years are ahead of it. If it can transform successfully to recreate the magic for potential customers and existing customers and employees, good luck with that, but I see his point here. That's true. They need to up the ante for excitement. And notice in the last 4 or 5 years, they've done the exact opposite. They've done away with roadshows. They've got out of Boy Scouts. What they replaced it with has completely fallen on its face. Everyone is bored to frickin' tears in church, etc. So he said, when I read stage 2, this is what I thought. Now, what I want to do here, forgive me for the repeat, but I think his analysis here is so excellent. I'm going to read each one of the markers again in stage 2, and then I'm going to read Dr. Moore's reaction to those markers. The first marker, unsustainable quest for growth, confusing big with great. Success creates pressure for more growth, setting up a vicious cycle of expectations. This strains people. It strains the culture, the system to the breaking point. They can't consistently deliver on tactical excellence, so the institution frays at the edges. Dr. Moore says, there was a time, not so long ago, when the church's rate of growth evinced its greatness. Indeed, it's right to succeed. Now, many of us have lived through that period, right? You'll notice they're no longer touting that. Of course not, because it's no longer one of the fastest growing religions in the world. None of the religions are growing at all, including the one true church, the Kingdom of God, Mormonism. So this gets very interesting. The second point in stage 2 is the undisciplined discontinuous leaps. The enterprise makes dramatic moves that fail at least one of the following tests. They do not ignite compassion with the company's core values. They do not show that they are the best in the world at these activities or in these arenas, and these activities do not help drive the organization's economic or resource engine. Dr. Moore said, perhaps the tendency to excommunicate outspoken members whose voices were correct, yet they undermined the credibility of the management. Now, this is a discontinuous act of violence, and it fails all three tests all at once. So that's very interesting. This is not how they should have handled it, but it's what the church is actually continuing to do at least since 2009, without question, right? So the third point, declining proportion of right people in key seats. There is a declining proportion of right people in key seats because of losing the right people or of growing beyond the church's ability to get enough people to execute on that growth with excellence. And Dr. Moore here said, it may not apply, but I wondered about the sustainability of exporting leadership across city, state, and even state and country lines through various missionary and regional callings. Interesting. They could not keep up with what was going on. Jesus couldn't either. They claimed they're running the church through his revelation. Okay, they claimed that. He's not a very good organization manager then, based on what we're seeing today. That's not blasphemous. We're using their claim and asking them, what gives, guys, right? So the next issue is the easy cash erodes cost discipline. The organization responds to increasing costs by doing the wrong thing. They increase prices and revenues rather than increase discipline. Dr. Moore said, the building expansion program, as wonderfully recounted in Princess McKay biography, is incredible evidence of this. Very good. Now, the fifth point, bureaucracy subverts discipline. A system of bureaucratic rulers subverts the ethic of freedom and responsibility that marks a culture of discipline. People increasingly think in terms of jobs rather than of responsibilities. Dr. Moore's comment is layers of authority and the file leader model, perhaps. The sixth issue is the problematic succession of power. The organization experiences leadership transition difficulties in the form of poor succession planning ahead of time or failure to prepare and groom excellent leaders from within. It could happen because of political turmoil or bad luck or an unwise selection of successors. Dr. Moore says here then, less relevant in a traditional CEO succession sense, but acutely unique to the church, this issue of succession crisis. And the reason why is because current presidents disavow or repudiate the teachings and policies of past presidents, essentially changing core values each time a new leader comes along. Now, I'd never quite looked at it that way before. This is powerful. This can and does set up transition difficulties, which become magnified over time. Very interesting point. The final point in stage 2 is the personal interests are placed above the organizational interests. People in power allocate more for themselves than anyone else. Here, he says, Dr. Moore says, your point applies here regarding conservatism and relatively modest lifestyles. I won't take the approach accusing church leaders of illegitimate monetary emoluments. Some might. A lot of us do. But I will point out the Pharisaical tendency over time to hero worship leaders in the church. Oh boy, Oh my. The celebrity status style vanity circus that occurs when leaders visit or speak at anywhere in the church is simply ridiculous. And some of them make a very big deal. I'm looking at you, Elder Bednar, about proper order and unwritten expectations, silencing dissent. And this is so odd because silencing dissent for a religious leader is about as self-aggrandizing as it gets. So this is a very interesting point. Now, Gabby Anton then brings up something else that I thought was extremely good. Let me make sure I'm not losing my way here. That's Dr. Moore. Nope, I am losing my way. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, these are some interesting suggestions. I thought 2:6 was one of the least applicable. Now, 2:6 is where we read about the problems of succession of power. Gabby Anton wasn't convinced that that was even applicable. But your creative interpretation makes it really important, and I can see it being very significant now. See, this is the value of discourse and honest discussion back and forth, disagreeing gently, and then coming to a greater understanding of a larger whole, more realistic point of view. This is something that the church does not engage in, and it has to, or it will lose, as I will show. So, of course, where I might drag my feet is difficulty seeing a clear succession of phases. So 2:6 seems very important right now, at the same time that 4:2 and 4:3 are important. And I want to read 4:2 and 4:3 because 2:6, the succession of power, might be a top challenge of the church today, with so Russell Nelson's going nuts like he is. But at 4:2 and 4:3, what he's talking about here is the radical change and revolution with fanfare. That is what we are seeing happen right now. The language of revolution and radical change characterizes this new era, new programs, new cultures, new strategies. The leaders engage in hoopla, and they spend a lot of energy trying to align and motivate people. They engage in buzzwords and taglines. That is really important. That is what we're seeing. So now, Dr. Moore says, yes, I think the pattern is evident to many observers. And while there may not be a perfect analogy between business and church, so see, he's not just trying to blindly criticize the church without some thought. That's not what we're doing here. That's not what we ever do. We see issues, we see problems, and these can be preventable, and they have chosen not to prevent them for one reason, amazingly enough, which is positively shocking. I've said this numerous times, and I will continue to say this numerous times. They can't see it. They're on the inside of this animal, and they don't realize the errors that they're making. And so this is really important. The spiral is outlined by Collins as he highlights case studies that illustrates a compounding effect of human nature on critical decisions. Now we have 15 humans running the church. None of us has ever seen Jesus in a general conference, at a stake conference, at a ward meeting. Jesus is nowhere to be seen or heard except with just the prophet in Salt Lake. That's their saying that, right? So this human nature really makes problems. They love to say, yes, we're being guided by God, the creator of the universe. Then why do they keep making The same damn stupid human errors. Surely Jesus can see far enough in the future to where he could potentially say, next week you're going to try this. Don't bother. It won't work. But we see none of that happening at all. They're throwing everything they can against the wall to see what will stick, is the impression they're giving, because that's what they're doing. So circumstance and luck plays a role in all of this, of course. But part of what he seeks to do for the executive reader, Collins, is to parse out those situational contours in order to reveal where actions that seem most logical at the time are most likely to produce negative unintended consequences. This is what we are seeing in Mormonism. It's very difficult to see divine guidance when they come out against the LGBTQ children as a godly revelation, according to Russell M. Nelson. And then 3 years later, God says, well, that caused a lot of bullshit and problems. Go ahead and take it back. I take it back. Never mind. That's impossible to accept, that God would change his mind under social pressure so soon from a divine revelation from him who knows all. I mean, come on, you can only buffalo us so long, Russell, and now you're just full of shit. That's how you're viewed. And so if you want to change that, maybe a real revelation could really help you here. I'm not going to cross my fingers for you. I don't think it's going to happen. So, and here's the other thing that is so interesting that Dr. Moore brings out that I wanted to read. I see a lot of stage 2 behavior evident in the LDS church's past. Now, here's the kicker. Most of the stage 3 markers are right now. So they are moving through that chart. They are moving up, and most of the markers are being seen in stage 3. And we are beginning to see through the patterns of how the leaders are dealing with social issues, with economic issues, with political issues, and with scientific issues, and with religious issues. We are seeing many of stage 4 points beginning to occur. And that is why I wanted to do this video. It's pretty interesting. Are church officials falling into common stage 4 traps? Or are they beginning to take prescriptive turnaround actions? Because there are things that a corporation must do in order not to fall all the way through stage 4 into stage 5, which is bankruptcy and obliteration. But very few of them do that because they think, as Gordon B. Hinckley said, all is well in Zion. And they couldn't be more wrong. Now, this is fascinating. So, regarding stage 3 markers, here is a very interesting thing in church past history that has happened. Stage 3 says this. This is one of the best parts of Dr. Moore's analysis as far as I'm concerned. If you're still with me at this point, congratulations, you get the gold forehead on your star. The first marker in stage 3, now this is the pinnacle stage, is amplify the positive, discount the negative. There is a tendency to discount or to explain away negative data rather than presume that something is wrong with the church. He says company. I'm going to start saying church now because that's what it is. Leaders highlight and amplify external praise and external publicity. Here's what Dr. Moore says. The blaming and here's how the church is doing this. The blaming and shaming the internet and members who discover negative history. The public relations stunts on various small donations to equality and love groups, yeah, they're in stage 3 because they're doing everything in stage 3 that they shouldn't be, right? So here's the second point in stage 3 that the church is guilty of. Big bets and bold goals without no empirical validation. You don't have a reason validly to make a big bet and increase your goal enormously, but you do it anyway because it impresses the people in your company for the time being. That's the idea. Here is how it happens in the church. They always talk about hastening his work. Isn't that interesting? Hastening his work. Missionary age is another issue. And the absurd 100,000 goal of Elder Holland for total missionaries in the field. They are also building way more temples, even while attendance and utilization continue to decline every year. Russell Nelson builds more temples. And we'll have more to say about this here in just a few minutes. So the next idea is incurring huge downside risk based on ambiguous data. When faced with ambiguous data and decisions that have a potentially severe or catastrophic downslide, what the leaders will do is they will take a positive view of the data, and this is where they run the risk of blowing a hole below the waterline in their boat. And then they turn around and say, oh, well, stay in the boat. Where will you go? No, don't stay in the boat. The damn thing is sinking, man. This is the Titanic. Here is what Dr. Moore notes the church is doing that they shouldn't be. The risky church essays that they put up on their website, bet, and then they followed up with equivocation as the church leaders addressed the obvious, their own unreliability as spokesman for God. The hole blown below the waterline might be applied inoculation theory. I love that inoculation. Oh. The fourth item that the church does but shouldn't, here's what a corporation does in order to begin declining is they say the erosion of healthy team dynamics. So there is a marked decline in both the quality and the amount of dialogue and debate. And what happens is the shift moves toward dictatorial management rather than a process of argument and disagreement, followed up by the unified commitment to executive decisions. There is a democratic discussion with all parties involved for those corporations that do not decline into destruction. Those who do so are because when the leaders speak, the thinking has been done. Never criticize the church leaders, even if you're right. That is the wrong approach. But that's the only one Mormonism knows, right? Here's Dr. Moore's comment. Did the church ever have healthy team dynamics? Likely not relevant as a before-after, because the starting point for the church, even as councils became a thing, well, we do have councils in the church. Even before that, the starting point is never drew on proven management decision models. It's always been based on what Joseph Smith said. And he was not a manager. He was a fill in the blank. The next idea is the externalizing blame. Now, this is so interesting. Rather than accept full responsibility for setbacks and failures, the leaders point to other people to blame, not themselves. It's never, the church is perfect. It's the people that are not. Love the people, but realize the church is perfect. You see the brainwash here. This is very important because here's the problem. From the beginning, the church never accepts the blame. But to me, there is an acceleration and amplification of blame externalization as the information age begins to take shape. For instance, it used to be those anti-Mormons every now and then, whereas today, hardly a week goes by in the church without some forceful admonition to avoid Google, to avoid disaffected members, to avoid the CES letter, to distrust non-approved sources, to distrust yourself, to doubt your doubts, in a complete 180-degree turnaround on the old mantra that doubt leads to faith and faith equals doubt. Now, an encouraging signal is seeing acceptance of books like Bridges and greater encouragement to just love and accept those who doubt or leave the faith. So they're attempting lamely to make up for their idiotic shortcomings and casting blame everywhere except where it ought to be. I suppose it's our fault, too, that Mormonism got fined $5 million by the SEC. That's our fault, too. Even though they refuse to tell us about the finances, they can blame us for that. See, you idiots, cost us $5 million. We need that back pronto. Can you pay an 11% tithing for the next year? Who knows what bullshit they'll come up with, right? This is fascinating. Now, here's another one that is just so interesting. The obsessive reorganizations. Rather than confront the brutal realities, the enterprise chronically reorganizes. People are increasingly preoccupied with internal politics rather than external conditions. And this is Dr. Moore's analysis, this is possibly Nelson's personality and possibly because so little happened under Thomas S. Monson. But anyway, yes, the pace of organizational change in the church today is breathtaking. I see the changes as problematic, especially because they're being attributed to revelation. An unfortunate but all too common pattern of dishonesty between management and employees. Dishonesty wrecks organizations faster than any external challenge because it undermines the fabric of confidence without which there really is nothing left. And for all of their inspired insights and great spiritual power, I'm not convinced the leaders grasp this yet. It's amazing, isn't it? So, very interesting. Ironically, taking 5 and 6 together, the external blaming and the obsessive reorganizations, by wrongly externalizing blame and claiming internal revelation for change, doubly opposite to the healthy and honest practice of internalizing the blame, it is you leaders' fault, and openly acknowledging external forces driving the change. Yes, we're biased, real jerks when it comes to the LGBTQ. You don't hear any of that. But if they were to come forward as actual leaders instead of pretending to be because God tells them what to do, supposedly, church leaders are committing a dual atrocity on its members. Lie number 1 is blaming the wrong party. They blame you and me. Lie number two is saying that the next move to the wrong source. You have to willfully look away not to see this for what it is. Heck, they're doing it to their own past prophets. Think about this. Oh, it's not me. It's not me. It was that bozo 50 or 100 years ago who spoke a well-considered opinion. They're even throwing their own prophets under the bus now. That he was wrong. Yes, this has been going on for a long time. It's not new in any sense, but each time it happens, this hole gets deeper. Very interesting. Also, the church does not seek apologies. Very famous comment from church leaderships. So, think about how many times the church leaders have been caught red-handed doing this. Go way back. Polygamy, the Nauvoo expositor, Joseph Smith's murder. Blame was externalized when it should have been internalized. Joseph lied about polygamy, and he ordered the expositor to be destroyed in order to defend his lie about polygamy. You'll never hear that explained in church that way, but that's the fact. Blame was externalized by leaders to those lying liars and those murderous mobsters. Then, after the reorganization, the big change, that is, they moved west, was internalized as a revelation from God to Brigham Young, of course, yes. It wasn't rightly attributed to a decision foisted on willing saints due to a refusal by leaders to correct past and present actions and committing to the laws of the land. Nope, not at all. Doubly wrong, doubly harmful, and now no longer defensible as a truth-filled narrative. Furthermore, Joseph followed this method in his youth too. Caught in one lie, he would claim a vision or a revelation that simultaneously blamed the accusers, and it refocused authority back onto him. He honed the pattern as a treasure dig leader, if the stories are even half true. From memory, I can see the same 1-2 punch working in the incident of the 116 lost pages, the retroactive priesthood visions, the Kirtland Bank, the United Order. Later on, we have polygamy again, about 1900. We also have blacks and the priesthood. We have the idea of the missionary ages changing, women's roles in the church, child protection, 2-hour church, small temples, and that's just to name a few items here. You see how they're really making a mess of it because they're too damn proud and arrogant to admit that they don't have any revelation, and they had got to pull their heads out of the sand. Yeah, but they won't do it. So I see the reorganization changes pushing into the fourth stage. This is why the church leaders are saying we are hastening the work. See, what they have to do is they have to keep you distracted from them really being really bad leaders and making a lot of mistakes and a lot of people no longer believing in them. Now they say, well, we've got to hasten the work of the Lord. See, we're going to have home-centered, church-supported. And now they have this cool lingo-jingoism, the covenant path. They also have this jingoism of the true name of the church, serving as misleading marketing at best. So take hastening the work, for example. It was a radical change. It was heavily marketed. The number of missionaries surged after that went out. Convert baptisms took a bump upward with the surge, of course, and then it all fizzled out. It wasn't even real. We could have predicted that effect by mathematically examining the population, by the way. Did you know that? And then the hoped for positive results of sustaining higher rates of missionary service and stronger conversion numbers, that just did not happen. We're right back to where we were now as we were pre-COVID. And now what do we get? Nothing. No one talks about hastening the work anymore. No one talks about any of that. That is not how good turnarounds look. That is not what honest leadership looks like. So on stage 4, number 5, which is also really interesting, I want to read this. Confusion and cynicism. So people cannot easily describe and articulate what the organization stands for, that is, the core values. They have eroded to the point of irrelevance. The organization has become just another place to work, a place to get a paycheck. And so what happens is people lose their faith in their ability to triumph and prevail. Instead of passionately believing in the organization's core values and goals, people become distrustful regarding the visions and values, because all that is public relations and rhetoric. I've said that myself, right? That's what it is. So on this issue, I hear more cynical comments among active members today than I ever have in my entire lifetime. Dr. Moore, by the way, is an active Mormon in Utah, just so you know. He really is. So that's purely anecdotal, but it's absolutely there, percolating through even the best and the most committed members. It comes out here and there. It comes out in meetings. It comes out in the social gatherings. It comes out between family members. The thing about people is they are exceptionally good at recognizing duplicity and deceit. Someone needs to get that memo to Salt Lake City quick, because them old bags don't believe that. They think we're so damn dumb that we believe everything they say. Were you aware of that? That's what they think. Let's show them wrong. Let's show them they're wrong. So, and finally, the final point, of course, and this has to come up time and again, fundamentally so, the corporation of the church has so much cash that they have hoarded that it will absolutely outlive the present downward spiral of its religious narrative. There's no question. If the church were to completely face the music, pivot away from prophetic mantles and hot potato revelation, and focus instead on just doing good in the world, it has the resources and organization in place to make an enormous impact. I dare say if the full weight of Ensign Peak were deployed by the church, then I believe, with somewhat of an inside baseball view on the numbers, it would be the largest charitable organization in the world. But we all know that's not going to happen, because these people that are leading the church do not have that kind of wonderful vision. They've lost it. They are in apostasy from Jesus's point of view. All you have to do is read the New Testament, what Jesus said, and then compare to what these guys are saying and doing, and you will see they don't know what Jesus is all about in any manner. And that's amazing. That's absolutely astonishing. So, got through that, thank goodness. Now, and this one is by Kairos, who says, now what gets real interesting here, the significant aspect here is that Kairos notes that there are some interesting concepts in Collins' principles and your insights into their applicability to the Mormonization. Thanks. Hold on. I've got to get to page 2. I apologize. Here we go. So I remember when the CEO of my company mandated Good to Great to be read by all the vice presidents and those above. He even quizzed us in high-level staff and trustee meetings. However, he fell from power, much as Carly Fiona did, by not having a good cover of loyal trustees in his own corner. So a silent coup took place, mainly based on rumor enhancing a business loss during the Olympics, when a foreign government stiffed our company for about $25 million. It was mostly recovered through international courts. But anyway, the CEO is long gone. But this information network of power persons in an organization, they can pull off these kind of activities, especially if there's 1 or 2 leaders in that group. Companies usually suffer, not only in terms of revenue and growth, but also in employee morale. For hardly is the true story of the demise of the CEO or board chair brought out. And that's so true. In the Mormon Church organization, we hear that junior apostles speak only when asked. Nelson has a tight grip on everything he wants and may really trust only his buddies. He probably cannot call out all of the apostles' names from memory, and loyalty and obedience are the principles that dominate in the decision-making apparatus. The prophet is never wrong, and President Newsroom makes sure of that. And it also reinforces that PR image to the rest of the church through the church news, right? So it's very interesting. Now, Dr. Moore says, these are excellent suggestions. Thank you for sharing. Colin's focus is more of his research and book on large enterprises. He looks at very long-term trends. The companies he looked at had decades plus stock price outperformance as a minimum threshold to be considered in his study. He wanted to see what makes companies great and why they fall. What are they doing to cause them to fall? So far, what we're seeing is everything the Mormon Church is doing right now as a corporation. The rest of you do the opposite, because they're bombing down into stage 4, and that's one step away from death. It's over when it's over. When you get to stage 5. Mormonism in the last 4 years since Dr. Moore brought this up has slidden further down into stage 4. They are not doing things correct. That's the point of this whole study, right? So this is really, really important. There's one more item that I wanted to get to that was very, very interesting. He's trying not to simplify or oversimplify either. Think, for instance, and this is the $1 million point. This is incredibly insightful from Dr. Moore, and of course, the church is not going to do this. Think, for instance, if the LDS Church had not been so consumed with growth as a manifestation of its divine origin, but instead, if they had only put relentless emphasis on the quality of new bishops. Now think this through. I mean, it's a ridiculously high bar. That's true. Extensive training, mental health evaluations, background checks, deep reference checks, apprenticeship, required education sources in psychology, law, divinity, child development, leadership, organizational behavior, public speaking, and member-level knowledge of at least 5 other religions. Now, say the program was so intense, it took 5 years to produce this new LDS bishop. What would be different in the church today? Obvious answer. The church would be a lot smaller, and missionaries would have done something other than look for baptism candidates all over the place. More seriously, though, what might be healthier and better for the church as an organization seeking to do good things in the world? Is there anything better than that? Someone needs to tell Salt Lake City there really isn't anything better than that. And it ought to be someone who has enough clout that those closed-minded dorks will pay attention. Good luck finding someone who can give them that message. I can't. They don't care about me at all. I can't blame them. I don't care about them either, other than the fact that they are harming more than helping nowadays. And that is why we make these videos. Make no mistake about it. Okay, so this is closer to the way mainstream religions work this, by the way, how they train their clergy. Training for ordination is typically several years of full-time study at an accredited seminary, followed by a couple of years of internship in some kind of junior ministerial role. Then in return for that large investment, mainstream clergy have a career in a respectable middle-class job. So they're not expected to perform their religious leadership duties on top of a normal life. So how much better is this than the Mormon model of amateur clergy? Now, they love to, again, it's a PR stunt. It's a circus move. It's a clown act. Well, we don't have any paid clergy. Well, number one, that's a bullshit lie, we now know. You're bullshitting us, you're lying, and we're calling you on it. But number two, you also don't have anyone qualified to be with my children behind closed doors talking about sex either. So I would prefer less volatility and more predictability in the clergy, even if the organization isn't growing, even if it meant paying the clergy. What is so wrong with paying the clergy? You see, Mormons have made that such a stigma. I mean, that's as bad as masturbating, right? To them, oh my God, there's nothing worse than masturbating. I would rather have you go kill someone on the street than play with your little factory, you know. The stupid disproportion of problems coming out of Salt Lake is incredibly astounding, right? Growth in numbers doesn't make a church super successful. Someone needs to go tell those guys in Salt Lake City, man, right? Any more than growth in national parks, local soccer teams, or bowling leagues make those enterprises successful. It starts with definitions of success and purpose. So your comment made me think a bit more about the Mormon model of sustaining the leaders, even especially local leaders possessing enormous training and education deficits. This is not just a nice activity to support each other. It is arguably a requirement for the growth at any cost model to work. Furthermore, the notion of a God-inspired calling heightens the stakes for members who might otherwise be tempted to point out those flaws and ask for change. You see, the way they set it up is close to a perfect brainwash. When you find those whom you can't criticize, you have found who owns you and controls you. That's the key. That's what Nietzsche said. As it becomes more evident that local leaders are not only poorly trained, but also not God-called, cynicism grows and weakens the whole. This isn't a new thing, but the information age accelerates our awareness of the really too human, too unqualified aspects of the calling of new bishops and stake presidents from their revelation. It's too human, and yet there is no discussion. The Lord's church, the kingdom of God, is not a democracy. And that's why you're having so many problems right now, because it means ultimately you're clueless about how to run an organization. You're entering stage 4. In fact, they're there. So anyway, now, and this is the part I've been leading up to. I hope I haven't taken too much time. I have, but this is so powerful. Dr. Moore just shines at this point. That this is incredibly wonderful. He's going to recap what I gave you, all this information that I just gave you. He gave us in 2019. Now he's going to recap the information with examples from the church leadership right now. Let's take a look. This is absolutely eye-opening, marvelous. So this post was made 3 years ago. Recent events in the church in 2022 and 2023 prompted me to ponder Colin's important work again. I think it is highly relevant to the institution of the church. To be clear, when I say church in this context, I'm looking at the enterprise comprised of interconnected structures, members, leaders, policies, and theology, or in the operative metaphor, employees, leadership, systems, and product. So here's the recap. In 2019, I felt the data indicated an enterprise that had moved beyond stage 2, represented by the 1970s to the 1990s, where everyone was mistaking size and growth of the church with greatness, and it was exhibiting a number of stage 3 markers and some of the markers in stage 4. So for a litany of reasons, Russell Nelson has served as a catalyst for the decline of the church. I will repeat that. For whatever reason, Russell Nelson has increased the decline of Mormonism. Why and how? Let's take a look at the data. Here are the biggest issues marking stage 3. Whitewashing history, inventing miracles and miracle stories while ignoring failures and missed opportunities. We had public relations stunts, small donations to equality groups. Just recently, the Mormon Church contributed charity to the Catholic Church. I mean, wow, really? I did Mormon News Roundup, and we talked about that story. So, number 2, hastening his work. See, this was a big thing that Russell Nelson came up with. The mission age, and then Holland's ridiculously bullshit, false prophecy of 100,000 missionaries as a goal, building many more temples as activity and utilization flatlined. The next issue was the POX, that is the policy of exclusion, manifested its catastrophic downside risk. And so in a short time, Jesus, because he loves us, reversed policy, changed his mind, and told Russell Nelson, oh, all right, let's change it. The essays on the church website, coming clean with their past history, is how they touted these essays. These will finally tell you the truth. And all they did was they admitted that everything anti-Mormons had said was actually the truth. And now they accepted that truth. And it's amazing because this was a necessary gambit, but the downside risk was immense. And thus we see the subsequent equivocation, and now they're de-emphasizing the essays. We're nowhere near done. The notion of councils who are reliant on file leadership and patriarchy, the team dynamics in church leadership have never followed proven sustainable models, blaming the members for everything that happens, blaming Google, blaming unreliable or unfaithful sources for the loss of faith, blame anyone except the people in charge. Excommunication of Sam Young, who was willing to defend your children and mine from sexual predator bishops and stake presidents, and the church kicked him out. Now, you just percolate on that. You just go right ahead and think about that. Nelson's rapid-fire changes, rebranding, reorganizations, no more Mormon. Oh, hey, by the way, 2-hour church. Oh, hey, no more Boy Scouts. Oh, hey, a new hymn book is announced. Woohoo! Home teaching. No, get rid of that and we'll call it ministering. HPG consolidated with EQ, that is the high priest group consolidated with the elders quorum, because of course so many people are no longer going to church that you can't hold a proper quorum, so you have to combine them. Now, no, that's not how they explained it, but that's the actual physical dynamics that actually was happening, right? Youth interview changes, weekly missionary nod to phone calls home while on a mission. Civil marriage is okay now prior to sealing. Ward young men presidencies are discontinued. Hey, the good news is women can now witness baptisms. The temple ceremony asks the wife to covenant to obey God, not the husband. As Holland noted in 2018, President Nelson, I don't know how many more rushes we can handle this weekend. And you notice every single one of these is just a stupid stunt to get it to look like, look at the tremendous progress of the kingdom of God. And it's all just PR circus work. It means nothing. Women are now given permission to raise and lower the podium during sacrament meetings. They can now pull that little button under the bishop's armchair so that they can raise the podium. Okay. Small notions of apostle worship, such as standing when they enter or leave a room, remain seated until they stand, and near doctrinal insulation of leaders from rank and file members under the guise of order and file leaders. Plus, let's not forget Nelson's World Stadium Tour. In 2019, I also saw early signs of stage 4 decline. Many of the practically benign adjustments of Nelson's rapid changes were introduced with revelation fervor and fanfare. Oh, God is opening up the heavens to me, and I share them with you. And it's all just pap and pablum. So the energy that is attached to ordinary or experimental changes felt way out of proportion. So early signs of disappointing results in previously overhyped changes, most notably the much touted hastening the work mission age reduction, which had the mathematically guaranteed results of juicing missionary numbers temporally. We knew that would happen. What follows? A bump in baptisms. And all of a sudden, oh wow, look at this. We're getting so many more baptisms. Jesus is coming back now. He could be here next Thursday at 6 o'clock. You better get your ass in the bishop's office, repent, leave your little factory alone, and pay your gosh dang tithing, folks. Jesus is coming for supper. They made such a big deal about that. And now it's gone right back below where it was before the age change. And it didn't take that long to do that. Of course, all of that you can see mathematically. It's obvious. And now, of course, the predicted 100,000 missionaries never did happen. Not anywhere close. And now, of course, the less frequently hastening the work, the less frequently mentioned idea is less frequently mentioned than the word Mormon in the church now. So, and then there's anecdotal evidence of cynicism in church pews, meetings, activities between the active believing members of my family, says Dr. Moore. Now, here's the 2022 update. That was 2019. 20, 21, 22. 3 years later, see, ain't math grand. 3 years later, here we are. What does he find? I see more by the way of stage 4 evidence. Here's my evidence of stage 4. It's getting progressively worse. 3 years of newsroom statements on church finances, but zero transparency in the form of actual financial statements. Legitimate questions about money, charity, investments are entirely, wholly discounted over the pulpit, while every small donation to any good cause receives its own church newsroom article of bragging and bravado. See how we care about charity, but don't you dare ask us for transparency. Ongoing questions about church history are minimized. Ongoing questions about church history are mocked in frequent BYU and youth firesides, which reiterate the old whitewashed lies of the, quote, faithful narrative, unquote. We are now at 300 announced temples, nearly double the number of temples in existence when Nelson was illegitimately, that is, prior to church-wide common consent, set apart as president. In that same time span, membership has been scarcely better than just flat. There's been no growth at all, and yet Russell Nelson has called for 300 more temples to be built. Active tithe-paying membership is likely down. Likewise, the gospel topics essays have been diluted and de-emphasized. One new big bet with downside risk: the new FSY guidelines no longer proscribe certain activities which the church technically hates, that is, for the strength of youth. Grab popcorn and cue the fireworks over tattooed missionaries, 10 earring temple wedding photos, and bishops encouraging masturbation, and the like. The march toward furthering numbing the members to embrace autocratic leadership who want to never be criticized for gross errors continues. The latest salvo by Ahmed Corbett said this, quote, "Activism toward the church is one of the great mists of darkness of our time, an especially effective tactic that Satan is using to blind and mislead the young," unquote. That is precisely opposite of what healthy organizations do, actually. Loyal opposition should be welcomed, and social activism should be encouraged with civility, not silenced or shamed. Why, though? That's the question. Here we see Nelson's hypocrisy on full display. He likes to say that good information leads to good revelation. Another jingoism. But the best information often emerges through activism because the people at the top can't or won't see the reality without help. And we're not talking a putative revelation from Jesus. We mean actual real information from people who see the bigger reality than the brethren in Salt Lake City do. If there is one glaring cause of decline in the church, it is this erosion of healthy team and leadership dynamics. There is no team effort here. There is only Header Nelson, Heil Nelson, and he gives the law and it trickles down, just like trickle-down economics. The model being pursued by church leaders is not healthy, it's not sustainable, and it's not effective. So the idea of blame we look at next. Blame shifting on people who leave continues at a fever pitch, even as panic sets in. Insistence on avoiding unfaithful sources of information. They blame lazy learners and lax disciples, or those disaffected, or some of those who have a sort of a hidden agenda to propagate lies and misrepresentations. In this environment, church leaders are implicitly teaching that no one who leaves can be trusted to tell the truth. Stay in the boat. is synonymous with anyone not in the boat is an untrustworthy pirate. The charade has become almost comical to the Mormon youth. To the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint youth. Maybe now Russell will listen to this, since I did say the correct name, right? They can spot bullshit, Russell, from a mile away thanks to a lifetime of access to instant and full information available to them. You really need to come up to snuff, Russell. Seriously. Add to this the general authorities giving poor taste talks, and they're blaming members for asking why leaders were racist. Leaders will never live that down. Oh, thank you, Steve Acosta. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's too bad I won't get it, but it's helpful. So, blaming young men for wondering if they should serve missions. And lastly, the church is aggressively externalizing the blame regarding SA, despite evidence of systematic cover-up. SA is sexual abuse. Despite evidence of systematic cover-up, hush money, and avoidance of negative publicity, all at the expense of the victims. The new church logo, you have new programs for children and youth. You have new roles for women in rituals. You have new garment designs. You have new temple clothing. Young women matriculate at age 11 in birthday year, and young men get Aaronic priesthood at age 11 in birthday year. See all of these magnificent changes, progress, and growth that is so meaningless. And yet he's convinced everyone who's a true believing Mormon that this is really great progress, right? Who can forget Nelson's bizarrely meaningless April 2020 Restoration Bicentennial Proclamation to the world, right? There is clearly panic in the hierarchy. About people leaving, there is great panic. About losing the youth, they're terrified. About money, they're absolutely mortified. About no longer growing, they're very, very terrified. About light being shown in the church's sex abuse systems, they are terrified about long-term, about potentially losing the right to enjoy tax-free status and BYU accreditation. They are openly discriminating, but they don't want to lose their accreditation. They're terrified about that. Look at the hastily written, foot-stomping newsroom rebuttals to the Arizona AP sex abuse coverage. John DeLynn had a recent insider scoop that tithing revenue is way down from pre-COVID. Then you have Bednar at the NPC informing the whole world that the church doesn't need their money, referring to the poor members who must pay tithing anyway if they want to get to the temple. With Ensign Peak advisors, the church has built itself a golden calf And they are scrambling to convince members it doesn't worship the calf. And the calf isn't actually an idol, but it sure as hell is gold, right? There is panic about LGBTQ activism and advocacy. Holland's instantly infamous musket fire talk to convince members just shows how worried the brethren are about this issue. It's like, hey, we're driving off a cliff, but will you clowns at BYU grow a spine and back us up already? Yeah, because we've already spent hours discussing it internally and we've got nothing. Reports are that young people today get some 70% of their information. The young people get that information on social media platforms. 70%. And I'll give you one guess between ex-Mormons and Mormons on social media who has more content, better arguments, doesn't hide facts, and consistently articulates behaviors that are and aren't honest and moral. If you guessed ex-Mormons, you get to go to the head of the class. Thank you, Carol Lukes. That is very, very kind of you. Thank you for the super chat. The covenant path as the new rallying cry for church evangelicalism has become not only a revolutionary way to think about the role of the church's products, facilitating social lock in effects via covenants, but also a fresh method to virtue signal deference to top-down messaging protocols. In other words, they are reinforcing, brainwashing you and your children to shut up, sit down, do as we say, and believe us. No arguing. There was so much hype about the new youth programs, especially for boys, but also for the girls, after the exit from scouting. The results, however, have been nothing short of super lame. The new programs are not structured around achievement or extra church experiences, vocational learning, or social awareness. They're structured, they're worse than ever now that bishoprics replaced what was previously dedicated young men's leadership. Their programs for youth suck. Don't believe me? Ask the kids. But don't go to church to get to talk to them. They quit going a long time ago. You got to go to where they went. Where will you go? Well, they damn sure didn't go back to church. Right? Also, so much hype about the new hymn books. Oh, where are they? So much hype about the Shanghai China Temple, thanks to Russell's self-declared national hero status behind the red curtain. Cough, nothing burger, cough. Ministering sounded great. The word itself, ministering, that sounded great. And initially, the stories about elevated ministering were plentiful, but it's been an abject failure. Visits don't happen, and there is no longer a monthly cadence of accountability. Ministering didn't actually elevate anything. It merely killed an old program that most followed out of habit or duty. Welcome change, but not working as sold. Believing members are more vocal than ever. My friends are leaving. What should I do? Also, merger mania is driving fresh cynicism into all the corners of Zion. Mergers of wards, mergers of stakes, mergers of missions. The word Mormon continues to drive a wedge of cynicism between ardent believers who insist the virtue signal must be maintained for civility, and doubters who feel even less seen when their use of Mormon to alleviate discomfort in already uncomfortable conversations becomes the issue. The church has always developed thought-stopping techniques to prevent truly intimate dialogue about doubts. But Mormon might be the most brilliant one of all. Failure to use the full name of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in conversation with believers is suddenly the surest way to lose their empathy. It's silly. It's uninspired. It's pathetically weak. And it's nonsense. Roughly half of Mormons, that is 50%, get this, 50% now support gay marriage, rising sharply in a decade. What happens when that number goes to 60%, 75%? If the church has one ace up its sleeve, it's money. Yes, investors have been taken to the woodshed in 2022. That is true. So the church has less money now than it did a year ago. That is true, yes. But we're still talking about more money than God levels of wealth. Only a few people know for sure because leaders are too afraid of transparency, but enough data has leaked to peg the number ballpark $150 billion of investments last year, probably falling to some $120 billion this year, as rates and inflation drove asset deflation across the board. Anyway, at the end of 2021, the church had saved up some 30 years worth of operating expenses. Together with the right to tax members at 10% of income in perpetuity, the church will be financially stable essentially forever, even if half the members quit attending or paying. But another way to look at the financial health is the trend in yearly income. This is the metric which may grow to crisis levels if more people leave, or simply choose to follow their conscience by paying tithing to humanitarian charities rather than paying their tithing to support a pointless investment vehicle. So that's his comments for 2022. And now I have fantastic news for you. We have an update for 2023, and it's not really long, but it is long. In 2023, the church's steady march through stage 3 down into stage 4 in decline continues. How do we know this? Because we have the evidence. Let's review the evidence, and then we'll call it a night. Big bets and bold goals without empirical validation. Nelson has now announced 2023. Nelson has now announced another 120 new temples to be built. A wasteful spending spree in the context of stagnant member growth and growing evidence of declining activity worldwide. So these new buildings, how they justify this is they say it gives easier access for members. These are destined to become underutilized Potemkin symbols of the widening gulf between member behavior, the rising mistrust and apathy, and arrogant displays of faith by authoritative leaders. Incurring huge downside risk based on ambiguous data. What have they done here? I see two new ways this is playing out. First, leaders continue escalating a political game of chicken over social issues, such as marriage equality and gender identity, based on the ambiguous argumentation of preserving religious liberty. You gotta focus, 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 focus. We need religious liberty. Focus, focus, focus. Bonus if you can name who said that and in what movie. Focus, focus. You gotta focus, focus, focus. In other words, the idea of preserving religious liberty is the conservation of their bigotry. Second, the church has been exposed for not only hiding its vast wealth, but brazenly breaking the law to do so, all on the basis of an ambiguous fear-born notion that if members knew how rich the church was, they'd stop paying tithing. This bet, some 20 to 30 years in the making, defines stage 3.3 by incurring massive downside risk to the institution, not only financially, but also permanently jeopardizing its moral authority. These risks have been assumed by dozens of church leaders over more than a generation now, based on the unscientific and likely untrue assessment that the cost of transparency is greater than the cost of secrecy, even illegal secrecy. Another point is the erosion of healthy team dynamics. It's getting worse, not better. The stifling of opposition and dissent is textbook unhealthy team and organizational leadership. The anti-activism speech of Corbett. And then the idea of externalizing blame. Church leaders, dutifully following Nelson's lead, appear to have fully embraced the message that when the church faces negative consequences, it's Satan's fault. By golly, that sneaky little bastard. We don't always do the wrong thing, but when we do, it's Satan's fault for attacking us. Meanwhile, true victims of abuse are quietly hushed by the armies of attorneys at Curtin McConkie, the paid lawyers that helps the church out when it needs it. The panic and haste is an interesting point. Two notes. First, for those paying attention, Hardly a week goes by anymore now in which a stake somewhere isn't being collapsed from 9 wards down to 6 or from 6 wards down to 4. The brave face says it's strengthening the kingdom, but anecdotes from every situation are dire. Leadership is apoplectic about staffing basic ward functions, much less the temples. This collapse in activity now, this activity is happening even in Utah. Despite the great migration reported by every non-Morador stake reorganized. Second, another sign of panic and haste is the knee-jerk responses offered in the church's newsroom to all manner of legitimate issues that are now facing the church. From abuse scandals to settling serious violations of the law with the SEC. Beneath the legalese and needle threading, I see an organization acting in haste out of panic over the steady loss of its good name, and it's those assholes who are responsible for it. Because I didn't break the law and cost God $5 million. Don't look my direction, Russell. There's my response. Hype precedes results. Vague and uneventful promises by Nelson continue apace. Take this one like, in coming days, we will see the greatest manifestation of the Savior's power that the world has ever seen. October 2022. It's almost been a year. What do you got for us, Russell? Well, we're waiting. More jingoism. Statements like this are of the ultimate hype. And Nelson seems to invent a new one every 6 months for General Conference. And yet nothing new under the sun. Other than some new scandal or twist of marketing by the church, it's telltale grasping. Another one is the initial upswing followed by disappointments. This is more of a prediction. Post-pandemic, of course, we've seen an initial upswing in convert baptisms and missionaries in the field. All right, we get that. Sure. Both received with great fanfare. Now the kingdom expands. As Bruce R. McCarthy would have loved to have said, the caravan moves on. Both will turn down in 2024. And we will watch to make sure that prediction happens. That's Moore's prediction, and I'm with him. It's just a little bump, and then all of a sudden, crash and burn. Happens every single time. There's no reason to think it'll be any different at all. And then finally, the confusion and cynicism. Plenty to go around in the wake of the church paying $5 million to settle charges of deliberately breaking the law for more than 20 years. Anyone else's ass would have been in jail. Members who give themselves permission to look are coming away shell-shocked, properly so. Often unable to talk about it rationally. Man, there's tons of evidence on the internet. Have you seen how the TBMs responded to that fine? Wow. Talk about clueless. But I see plenty emerging with the sense of distrust and cynicism about it all. If you haven't seen that in me, you ain't been paying attention. The church is creating a whole new generation of social Mormons. And the nice thing is, Dr. Moore promises he will give us an update next year 2024. So that's essentially what I have on one of the important ongoing discussions about the business side of the church, while if you look at it from a certain direction or a certain perspective, looks really good. But it's entering deeper and deeper into stage 4, and there is a cost to pay. Now, what happened in the early Christian church when it entered stage 4, the Mormon church calls the Great Apostasy. And then, of course, because in a perfectly circular argument, the prophets of today's church says this is the restoration of all things. And yes, there were previous apostasies, but no, silly, there won't be any more apostasy. We're the final chosen generation. So apparently, they think they can do anything they want without consequences because Jesus is getting in his little red Corvette. He's turning the key and he's coming on down to cruise the world. And it's been 2,000 years and it's never happened. Of course, then technically speaking, only up until our age could he have had a little red Corvette. So maybe that's what he was waiting for. Who knows? So that's what I have for you tonight. I appreciate all your attendance. I appreciate all the excitement. Thank you for all of the super chats. That's very nice and generous of you. You're awesome people. You guys have a good evening. I've kept you over a little bit too long. I apologize, but not really, because this is important information. And the nice thing is we will have updates as we church watch from outside, because inside you can't see what's really going on. They aren't transparent. And so we find ways to learn the truth and knowledge that Father promised. And sure enough, we keep receiving it. So thanks, you guys. Be good, do well, have fun. Don't stay up too late. But if you do, have a lot of fun. Make lots of friends. Stay happy. Get lots of sleep. And I will see you next time on the Backyard Professor Live, where we kick ass and take no prisoners.